Hello there, Mr. Feeney, and welcome to the second rendition of our journal conferences. Quarter 2, I was mastering my craft. I hunkered down after surviving my first quarter as an AP Lit student and used this new form of journaling to experiment with writing, hence why I'm here. I took notes in class and observed that in the new rubric, the thesis was of great importance. Also, in many of our timed writings, using quote integration was crucial for a well-flowing essay. And so, using the upcoming AP test as inspiration, I've improved the quality of my thesis statements and have begun to weave in quotes masterfully into my journal essays, which are actually now shaping up to be more multi-paged essays instead of just one-page space fillers. Beginning with the more obvious of the two, my quote integration has taken a huge turn for the better. We had discussed this earlier in my quarter 1 journals, but during the summer, my journaling had zero quote integration. My journals, and all of them in the summer, were mere T-charts, as you can see. Just pages and pages and pages of lateral analysis, if you want to call it that. This comes from being the novice mentality I held in Honors English and even through AP Lang, as in those courses, having quotes was the main objective, not necessarily worrying about integrating them. So in that sense, I was doing a good job, as I had countless pieces of textual evidence to back my points. But that wouldn't cut it for AP Lit. With the new category of sophistication, I needed to do better. And so I tried, to give me some credit, in quarter 1. My first ever journal was a slap in the face of formatting. Instead of a regular T-chart, I flipped it 90 degrees and called it a day. Instead of going on the left side of my journal, now my quote sat like prettily on the top of the page and just was very pristine up there. But it looked like an essay, didn't it? No more physical lines separating everyone. Wrong. It was a failed attempt. I made such a big attempt to hide like the physical lines of a T-chart that I didn't even consider my spacing. The quote is there and the analysis is there. I might as well made it a T-chart, as the entire journal is just an analysis of the quote that is on top. In fact, I am a devil of my own craft, seems to, as in the analysis itself, as highlighted in the blue highlight, I say, to me, it's because it applies so well to the framework of the high school student's mind. We tend to play the game and feed the teacher what they want. But while that might get us a good grade, and I think I got an A on my first journal conference, it gives us nothing more than a waste of time. It seems that subconsciously, I knew that I was playing the game as I wrote the journal, as that was my intention. To impress you with my essay style of writing, which was just a cheap cover-up for the inverted T-chart scandal that I was hiding underneath it. But I was trying, and I still had a lot of ways to go before I was any good. I immediately took a step in the right direction and learned from my BSing and tried to shape up, if you want to call it that. But it's an ugly ride. In my second journal about Perrine, one of my quote integration attempts is, and it's right here, for her flashlight theory on page 6, the cone of the light is an area of the meaning, but its base fades out into the atmosphere. The symbol's meanings are almost infinite, but they are not unlimited. Now I'm moving the paragraph of quotations from the top of the page cleverly and trying to hide it in the midst of the rest of the writing. I like the paragraph because it filled up space and I used quotes, but 4 lines of quotations just for one measly point is unnecessary, to say the least. Now revising it, and that's what I did, as we can see on the left side of the journal, I could have just said, Perrine emphasizes her flashlight theory, where any symbol can have a cone of almost an infinite number of meanings, some brighter than the other. Now I'm not just copy-pasting Perrine to do the journaling for me, but instead I condense 4 lines of quotes into just 2 words that I need, and can instead use the remainder of the space to add a little bit of my own analysis for a change. It gives me a much more fluid transition. Talking about fluid transitions, I have a rather fluid analogy to compare my quote integration to. Think about a bottle of icy water. Ignore the bold color choice of pink. Every time you take a sip, you're almost immediately met with a barrier of sharp icy pain, as you can see here, right from the sound and the looks of the ice falling. Jolting your teeth away from enjoying a refreshing sip of cold water from a cereal bowl. The ice is like my so far quotes, trying so hard to fit in but failing. While they might have the potential to go with the flow, since ice is made out of water, they miss the point by abrupting your drink. What I needed to do was to melt the ice so it blended in with the rest of the journals, like a bottle of melted ice water. To the point where all my quotes in my journals were so seamless, sometimes it left you wondering whether I was using a quote in the first place, in a good way. Of course, I have examples once I can get this out of the way without ruining my laptop. Of course, I have examples of my shaping up this quarter. As to pick one, in Journal 33, if I can get there fast enough. In Journal 33, when I compare the juggler and his lives, how the balls the juggler juggles to the lives of the viewers escaping their daily hectic lives, I say, right here, however, after the introduction of a sky blue juggler, these same synchronous balls of life go wee in the air with a much needed break from the mundanity of life. The juggler teaches these burdened souls the ways of lightness, swinging them into a small heaven on his finger ends. I use 5 quotes in 5 lines, and it all goes down without a hunch. Smooth and useful as I only take the pieces of the quote I need to prove my point. Later in Journal 37, just a little ways onwards, I have potentially what I could say which is my most useful and most efficient use of quote integration. When I say in my journal about the poem The Mother, Gwendolyn Brooks is in pain. She claims that she has sinned and has seized her baby's luck. Brooks cries over the singers and workers that never handled the air because she stole their birds from them. She whines over her crimes and begs that even in her deliberateness, she was not deliberate. It is pitying to say the least. 7 quotes in 7 lines without a block in the road. Now, 7 quotes might be more than necessary for a mere journal to prove just one point, but I rest my case. I'm able to craft my sentences around these quotes to the point where you barely realize that I'm using them. By using only small portions of the quote, like sinned and seized and whines and crimes, I can only use these power words that are the central pillars for how Brooks conveys her true emotion. I don't need the whole line. It's not a regurgitation competition. I only need these few words for a strong analysis. And the examples go on. In every journal from Journal 31 through 42, which is kind of like the second half of quarter 2, if I had the time, I could read to you my integration of my quotes and could challenge you to tell me what is quote and what is not, as I mimic the style of the author, preserving the authenticity and brevity of their work while not merely just reciting their piece. I have also improved my work on thesis statements this semester. Obviously, since I had no real journals in the summers, because they were all T-charts, there was no practice of thesis statements there. Just scattered analysis for pages to come. But when it came to the time when I actually journaled with seeming purpose, I did so very poorly, in stating what that purpose was clearly. In Journal 4, if I can get to it, in Journal 4, which is my kind of journal about home burial. When I talk about how the lack of communication in the couple in home burial and how that drives them apart, my thesis is that's what this marriage has come down to misunderstanding. To misunderstanding is my thesis statement there. I could have mentioned how the lack of communication and grief is driving them apart in this back and forth argument, which could have been much more specific, which is what we're trying to do in AP Lit, but instead I keep it as vague as possible and just say that misunderstanding is what this marriage has come down to. Calling this a thesis statement is like calling Panda Express authentic Chinese. Not even in the same ballpark. But alas, I have improved. In Journal 27, I start to begin to show signs of improvement. As in my journal, re-looking at Romano with a new set of eyes, as in quarter 1 I thought he was a bunch of BS, and wrongly so. My thesis statement goes, I push away useful context and nearly sever the ties that were meant to be intact. Yeah, it does the job. I talk about how I look at Romano as a useful contact now against my rash thinking as a Q1 AP Lit student, but it's still very, very vague. The least I can do is bring up Romano in the thesis, instead of broadly talking about severing all my contacts in life. Better than a 2-word thesis, but nowhere close to good, and not even is miles away from AP Lit level. However, recently I feel like I've cracked the code and broken the barrier of creating a good thesis. Start off with something that comes to mind to get you going, and then spend time and tailor it over drafts to make it better. Geez, who would have thought that spending a little time and effort would make your thesis statements that much better? Mind-blowing. On Journal 31, my original thesis statement, if you can kind of read through the lines, I've crossed out a lot of it, is Li-Young Lee blankets his poem A Story with the words of desperation, which leave his readers suffocated by discomfort as they witness Baba's internal desperation. I am using too many big words here, like desperation, suffocated, discomfort, and blanket, which are confusing not only to the reader, but also me as I try and reread it after I finished the journal initially. Luckily, I edited this thesis, as you can see through all the strike-throughs, to say, Li-Young Lee, in his poem A Story, leaves his reader in discomfort as they witness Baba's internal desperation. I got rid of the two frills but no use words, blankets, and suffocated, which just distract from the main meaning of the thesis, making it clearer. Another example comes in Journal 37, where my original thesis was, Brooks tempts the audience with emotional lines. It was just something vague to kind of keep me going. But once I was done explaining my thoughts of how Brooks was in pain and use examples of her pain to persuade others to steer clear of her path of getting an abortion or whatever, my new and thought-out thesis is, while Brooks might seem like she is grieving upon her own tragic mistake, her cries indirectly target her audience to march away from the path she followed. Much more to the point than my original thesis, and all of these no-risk practices in my journals, which are not for a grade, are already paying dividends as my thesis statements go from a two-word, two misunderstanding to a thesis that actually clearly conveys what I'm trying to do with specific details. And it's just paying dividends since when I first started. As you can see, I've done a lot of growing in my first semester of AP Lit, as 12 minutes is barely enough to capture my growth. I've used fluid dynamics and have tried to improve my thesis statements, and I hope that I've showed to you without reasonable doubt that I've improved. Thank you.